Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Graham Cowgill. I'm one of the pastors here. Hope you're having an awesome day. Glad that you could join us. Something that we've said here at Shoreline a lot, I think rings especially true in these times. We've said that Shoreline exists to revive hearts, to restore hope, and to revitalize culture, and then ultimately to bring Jesus and his church to the front and center of everyday life. But I was thinking about those three words. Think about how necessary those are right now. Revive, restore, revitalize. I was just thinking, man, those words almost like breathe new life, right? It's like energy and joy and life fulfilled. But the thing is, all three of those words come from us allowing what happens here at church to impact our life. If we are watching a service and then forgetting about it, nothing changes. And we want to be known as the people who create change in our spheres of influence. All right, so my encouragement to you would be what we hear today. Let it impact your life. We don't want when people think of Shoreliners to say, oh, those guys know a lot or they're really smart. I don't think they'd say that. I think that ship has already sailed. But point is, we want people to say, Shoreliners are generous. Man, that church just loves people well. And that usually comes from embodying what we talk about here, right? Letting it impact our lives. So every week we have an opportunity to essentially practice our generosity, practice loving beyond ourselves. And when we give financially, that's why. We give for two reasons. One, it's healthy for our souls. It is good for me to not cling tightly to what I have, but instead kind of like hold loosely the blessings that God has given me. And two, man, what a great practice for us to start looking at the needs around us. We want to be a church that sees the tangible needs of the city that we're in and meets those. And that the city misses us when we're gone because they know that we love really well. So 3 easy ways that you can kind of partner with us in that. To give financially, you can give online through the website. You can give through the app. And there's a text to give option. And my encouragement to you would be, let's partner with what God is doing in this city, that we can be a part of the positive change here. So earlier talked about joy and life fulfilled, and there's something coming up that is an awesome opportunity for that. So middle schoolers and high schoolers, this is for you, or parents. If you have a middle schooler or high schooler, listen up. September 4th and 5th, we have the first week of school, right? The students can go to their football game Friday night, and then afterwards, starting at 10 p.m., we're going to have this youth lockout. And all the students are going to gather at the Shoreline building, what used to be the Nighttown building, and their party bus is going to pick them up. They're going to go bowling and then skating and then to like a movie at 3:30 a.m. and then back to the building in the morning for breakfast. And I've been watching the students these past couple weeks, and it just seems a little bit unfair, just what all is going on with the pandemic. And I thought, what an awesome opportunity for them to create memories that are going to last a lifetime. So you can go to the website shorelinechurch.net under the events tab, register for that. I would encourage you to do that. It's going to be the time of a lifetime for your students. So again, I'm so glad that you guys are here to join us today and enjoy this message. I'll be back in a little bit.
You call me out by name. Hey guys, good morning. I am so pumped to be here with the man, the myth, the legend,
The legend in my own mind.
our very own head honcho, Pastor Eric Parton.
Well, I appreciate that, Robbie, Pastor Robbie. I'm
Yes.
glad to be here with you. It's been a while since we've done this together.
For sure.
So I'm really excited about it because we're continuing our series, Simply Irresistible, which is about this series is about why we do what we do as a church, because we want the church to be irresistible. Jesus was irresistible, and we want the church to be irresistible.
For sure. And our church is irresistible, especially Shoreline Church, because of all the individuals that make up our community here. But today we're going to talk about something a little wonky, a little out there and simple, calling. All individuals, we believe that all individuals, all people have a calling on their life. And then when they become part of our community, we get to do what we do in our community here as part of Shoreline, here in Destin, here on Emerald Coast, because of you and your calling. And so when I say calling to you, Pastor Eric, what comes to mind with that?
Well, probably it depends. What comes to my mind, probably for some of you sitting out at Crab Island or at AJ's or even watching online, what comes to my mind, especially when I was 22 or 17, was I wouldn't even understand what you're talking about, because really it's kind of a church word. But now that I've been in church, I understand calling, and I think that everyone will understand it once we kind of explain it, because they'll go, oh, I get that. So if you're watching, don't tune off right now, because you're like, I don't understand this, because we're gonna break it down for you.
We're gonna break it down, because you might recognize calling, or instead of calling, you might say purpose, right? Or you might say your passion, or if you're lucky, your life's work even might be part of your calling, which is pretty cool. I love when people connect the dots and able to do practice their calling every day. But when it comes to that calling, it can be confusing. And many of you might be on your boat or wherever you're at. You might be thinking, I don't even know where my keys are right now, let alone find my calling. And so we'll break it down. And it's funny that we're sitting at this table right now, because this reminds me of a news desk.
News at 5, here with Robbie Truax.
Woo, yeah, because when I was in middle school, I wanted to be a news anchor. Okay, go with me. So in middle school, I wanted to be a news anchor because my name's Robbie. And growing up in the 80s and 90s, a little girl with the name Robbie was kind of, why couldn't I be
tomboyish?
Yeah, or weird, and everyone questioned it. Why couldn't I just have Brittany? Why couldn't I have Brittany or something simple, Jennifer? And so I always had to explain my name. But one night when I was watching the news, Channel 7, ABC News in Detroit, Robbie Timmons, this news anchor woman, is on there in her blazer, and she's looking all distinguished. And that's when I knew I was meant to be a news anchor, And so that didn't age very well at all. By the time I graduated high school, I decided I wanted to be an accountant, because all through high school, I was involved in BPA, which is Business Professionals of America. Nerd, but you were a surfer. I was in Business Professional of America, and I would go to conferences and everything and do all of that. So I just thought, okay, I'll be an accountant. That makes good money, all of that. But no.
Then when you realized you had to do math, you're like, oh, forget that mess.
Nope. So I'm like, okay, I'll put that aside. Maybe I should just go into business. I'm called to business. I can do that, right? Nope. That didn't work out. Go to college. Then I decide, okay, I love people. I love talking. This is cool. I'll go into communications. Nope. Still, I am lost for a direction when I was in college. And after a while, I just like, okay, I'm called to the mall. I'm called to shop at the mall. Let me just go to the mall. But
if that's what calling is, I'm called to go fishing.
Yeah. Actually, I believe you. I believe you're called to go fishing. But so I was dating this guy in college. And this is so funny that this is part of my journey. I was dating him. He was in the reserves for the Air Force. And that was my first connection to the military life. And then I decided to join the Air Force. 23 years old, joined the Air Force. And then this is a little known fact. When I got my assignment, I was supposed to come to Florida. this guy wanted to switch his assignment with me when we were at school. He's like, hey, you want to go to Bill? You want to go to California? I go to Florida. But something kept me. I was like, of course I want to go to California. But I was like, no, God is sending me to Florida for a reason.
It was the force.
The force was bringing me to Florida. And so get to Florida, find Shoreline, go into ministry. And that brings me to this table that reminds me of middle school.
Of a newscast desk.
Yes, it takes me all the way back. And so I don't know. Tell me about your calling.
Well, so here's what we want to do is we want to unpack this a little bit, because you might be sitting there at Crab Island or AJ's thinking, okay, calling, direction in life. I mean, this is all so confusing. And even though this is a kind of a church world, mainly a church word, it has real world ramifications. So what we want to do, because again, we want to change people's perception of God, but first we have to change the perception of church. Rather than ignore that word and we go on and talk about it and you just tune out, we want to break it down, because I have a feeling that once we break it down and you understand what it means, you're probably going to go, oh, that makes sense. But not only will it make sense, you'll probably realize, oh, I've felt that before. Mm-hmm. I understand that feeling. And so what you'll be able to do is actually put a name on what we're talking about, because we are for sure that you have felt this before. So kind of explain a little bit. Let me just give you a little bit of my background. We got some of yours, Detroit. Yeah. Some of you know I grew up in this area. I didn't have a lot of direction in life, mainly because my parents divorced early. I lived with my father, and all through high school, it was just about playing. So you say calling to go fishing. Yeah. Adventure and playing and all of that was that's what I wanted to do. So when it came to college, I had no direction. I didn't have a guidance counselor that told me that I needed to take ACTs or SATs. I didn't do any of that. So out of high school, I just kind of did whatever. It was pretty aimless. In fact, I ended up right after high school moving to New York City because I wanted to be a stand-up comic. I did drama through high school. I used to get sent to the office for doing jokes. I've got so many stories about that. Man. After a few years in New York City, I came back. I worked on the beach. That's where I met my wife, Darlene. I did some sail making where I made sails for sailboats. I didn't really have direction. I just kind of, whatever door opened up, I go, oh, that sounds like a good idea. But all through that period, I didn't know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Mm-hmm. I had ideas. I wanted to be rich, but I didn't know what I was going to do.
Right.
But we ended up moving down to Central Florida because of my job, making sales. I got a job down there, and Darlene started going to church, and eventually I became a Christ follower. And there was one decision that was really insignificant. Looking back on it, I have the luxury at 58 years old to look back and see how God has orchestrated the little pieces of my life, even some of them before I became a Christ follower, and how they all fell into place. And you go, well, this makes sense. But there was one decision where we were attending this church and they asked for volunteers they were taking the teenagers to Wet and Wild over in Orlando, and we need some chaperones. And I decided to volunteer. And I look back now and I realize how significant that decision was to do that. Now, when I did that, I didn't know this is my calling. Right. I didn't go to Wet and Wild and go, I'm called to teenagers. I'm called to, but you know what happened was I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I had fun. The teenagers liked me. I seemed to be popular with them. I started volunteering more and more, and pretty soon I became a leader in the youth ministry. And then after a while, they asked me to lead the youth ministry. And I did this for 7 years while I drove a UPS truck, but I was a volunteer in the youth ministry. But 7 years into it, we made a crossroad decision that if you would have asked me years before this about being in ministry, you're going to be a pastor one day,
wow,
I would have spit my beer out, okay? Because I was like, that's crazy. It was the farthest thing from my mind. But somehow, 7 years into this, I made a decision to leave UPS and go into full-time ministry because I felt this is what God had made me for. Now, what happened during that 7 years? Well, that's kind of what we want to talk about today to help you understand maybe what your purpose or your calling is.
Yeah, and I want to pull that string a little bit further too, because some of us, you might be going along and, experiencing life, and you're actually like, okay, things are going well for you. You might actually be rich, right? You want to be rich one day. Someone here might be rich. You're out on your yacht right now, and you're like, but there's something inside of you that's not feeling satisfied. There's still something that is out there, no matter what size boat you have or size house or the relationships you pursue, there's something in you deep inside. It's like, something isn't connecting. And so
Yeah.
I don't know.
A lot of people can be stuck in a job that's not satisfying.
Yeah.
And it doesn't touch their calling. Like
Right.
when I started working with young people, it hit me on the soul level. Even though I had a job at UPS, where I found my fulfillment was not at UPS. I found my fulfillment working with teenagers, and because I felt like I was connecting with my purpose, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So today we want to help you know what your very next step is when it comes to finding your calling. So let's do it. Let's get in there.
Because you might be thinking, I love God, I love my family, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
You want to make a difference still?
Yeah.
What do you do with that? And it can still be confusing.
Yeah.
So.
Because you're trying to lead your family. You know, first of all, wouldn't you say that calling can be confusing? So that's what you're saying. We want to find our next step.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to a story. I love stories. We're going to go to a story in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And again, we've talked about this before with SOAP. I talked about it last week. SOAP is it's where we read the Bible as a church. And if you want to know how to be able to what we're reading is if you download our app, every day we read a different chapter of the Bible. Now, here's why I'm bringing this up. We've been reading through 1st and 2nd Samuel. And that is the story of people like King Saul and people like King David and someone that we're going to look at today, a prophet named Samuel. Now, in the Old Testament, a prophet was somebody who spoke for God. In fact, this man Samuel was the one who first heard from God that David was supposed to be king. And if you were here last week, we looked at some of David's juicy exploits and what got him in trouble.
Yes.
And in fact, a prophet was the one that came to him and said, you're in trouble for this. So today we want to look at the story of Samuel. Samuel was 12 years old, and he was serving in the house of God, the tabernacle of God, in a place called Shiloh under a priest named Eli. Now, remember, back then we didn't have what we would call a relationship with God. People, if you did your religious duty through a priest. If you wanted to talk to God, connect with God, you went through a priest, okay? Yeah. So Eli was the high priest. Samuel was the son of a woman named Hannah who couldn't have children. So she made a deal with God. We've all made deals with God before. God, you get me out of this and I'll never drink or smoke. Well, that's what she did. She made a deal with God and said, God, if I can have children, I'll give the first one over to you. And that's exactly what happens. She has a little boy named Samuel. And so she takes him down and drops him off at the tabernacle. Here's my son. They're like, thanks a lot, lady. No. So he ends up growing up under the tutelage of this high priest because basically he's an apprentice in the house of God. And so this story right here takes place when Samuel's about 12 years old.
Yes.
Have I set it up for you?
Yeah, we did. And he's with Eli, who's the priest. And in the Old Testament, compared to now, in the Old Testament, the priest, that's the gateway to God. That's the gateway to God. Where if you wanted to worship, you wanted to pray, you wanted to confess, you had to go through a priest in order to do that. And so this is a high honor to be able to
apprentice under him,
to serve and learn under Eli. So Samuel will pick up in 1 Samuel chapter 3. It says, verse 1, the boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was where there were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. And so the ark of God is what symbolizes the presence of God. And I love, it's so cool that Samuel is like, I'm going to get as close as I can get to the presence of God. So he's laying right there. In verse 4, the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, said, here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, here I am. You called me. But Eli said, I did not call you. Go back and lie down. So he went and lie down. Verse 6, again, the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, here I am. You called me. My son, Eli said, I did not call you. Go back and lie down. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. So I love the Bible, how it kind of keeps us along and going along and help to explain. He didn't know He hadn't had that personal relationship with the
That's
Lord,
right.
so he didn't know. And so verse 8, a third time, the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." And by now, I'm sure Eli was probably like, okay.
Go to bed, boy. You're messing with me, man.
Seriously, go to bed. That's
Yeah.
like with my daughter. If it was my daughter, I'd just like, Sophia. Like all I say is Sophia. And it says, then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. And so
Yeah. And
reading that is pretty confusing, right?
that's right.
That's why for us, like Samuel was confused. Imagine, like, of course, we're confused about our calling. We don't know, he was as close as you can get to the presence of God, and he still didn't know
Yeah.
that was the Lord calling him. And so I want to ask you, how can you help us?
Oh, yeah,
How can
because-
you determine your calling?
Well, it is confusing here. Like you said, here's Samuel and he's confused. He doesn't even know the difference between the voice of the Lord and of men. And sometimes that's what happens to us. Maybe that's happened to you where you've decided that this is what I'm supposed to do in life, all based on what a man or a person has said to you.
Completely.
And Samuel ends up Eli ends up telling Samuel, go back and here's what you say to God. Here I am. I'm listening. And so maybe that's happened to you because I know it happened to me because for that 7 years that I was working at UPS, one of the things that happened is as I started to get more involved with teenage ministry and pastoring kids and teenagers and speaking, I started to look back in my life, even before I knew who God was.
Yeah.
And I realized that there was times that I believed that God was preparing me for this because of my passion, because of the interests that I had, because of the gifts. I'm not afraid of public speaking. I've never been afraid of public speaking. In fact, I got sent to the office many times for public speaking, when you weren't supposed to be public speaking, right? And I look back and I see how God was kind of preparing me in fact, during that time, I used to run, right? So I was running this 10K.
I feel like you've lived 10 lives.
Let's make it 8. I have at least one more left. I was running this 10K, and there was about 1,000 runners there, and I'm there stretching before the race. And this college student comes up and starts talking to me, and it was crazy because we end up talking. Turns out he grew up in the foster care system because both his parents were killed in an auto accident. He was on a running scholarship at the local college where this race was happening, and so I ended up inviting him to church. I ended up kind of becoming a surrogate father, a spiritual father to him. And I would look back and I would say things like that happened to me all the time. And so one of the things that I know about your calling is that if you understand what you're called to do, it's not going to be a surprise to you. Has that ever happened to you where you look back and you go, just like you talked about your Air Force, where you didn't take that job?
Right.
Or maybe now you wanted to be a newscaster and here you are.
Yeah.
You're speaking at a table that's like newscasting.
No, there's so many points. I mean, I can go on and on about all the different points of, yep, that was God. He was leading me. He was guiding me. And those are called confirmations.
Yeah.
Confirmations. That's what it sounds like to me, where you took a faith step. You decided to open up to something that was new to you, or something that might have stretched you, or something that was even fun for you.
Interesting and fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And then God just confirmed for you over and over. I love that because just like with Samuel, he'll call you over and over. And we don't have to think this, okay? We don't have to overthink this, because when we're willing to pursue something that seems like it's bringing us closer to God, then it's probably God.
Yeah.
It's probably God. And that's one of those first signs. Those are, sometimes we might not even hear it right. Sometimes I can't even imagine what would have happened maybe if I would have went to California instead of coming to Florida. Some sort of way God would have spoke to me again, or he would have probably guided me along again, or confirmed for me like, hey, nope, you're supposed to do something with your life.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do
I
something.
have no doubt that if you went to California, you'd be walking your calling. It would just probably look different than it does now. Maybe you wouldn't have the family you have now or be at this church, but somehow, because we always gravitate towards that thing in us. And I love what you said about confirmation, because so here we were 7 years into this, working with students. I loved my job at UPS. Great benefits. I mean, back then the insurance, I think we had a $25 a year deductible.
Oh my
we had a baby. And it was 100% paid for.
Wow.
I liked being outside with UPS. I liked being able to think on my feet, but we felt something stirring felt like there's something different, something's going on. Like this isn't it for us. I like the job, but that, as far as my life purpose, it doesn't fulfill that.
Right.
And found myself being fulfilled over here where I wasn't getting paid anything. And
Mhm.
so I remember one night my wife and I were praying, and we both felt like God was showing us a scripture in Luke 5:4. And in Luke 5:4, it's where Jesus tells the disciples to launch out into the deep and let down their nets for a catch. And both of us read that, and we felt like that God was saying it was time to leave UPS and go into full-time ministry. But how was that going to happen for us?
Mhm.
UPS was a great job. Our church was young and small. I couldn't just go to the pastor and go, "Hey, I think you should hire me." So we're like, what does this look like? We don't know. Well, the next morning, I decided not to go to work because I was feeling a little bit sick. And so I called in sick, and I got a call from my pastor, and he said, "Hey, would you be able to meet for lunch today?" And I said, "Sure." So I went to meet him for lunch, and we sat down, and he said, "Listen, I know you're going to probably have to pray about this, but we would like to offer you a full-time job to be working
Love
as our
that.
youth pastor." And right then I knew that
Yeah.
that's exactly what we were supposed to do. Why? Because everything in us was leading us into that direction, including what we'd prayed that night. We realized that this is what we were supposed to do with our lives.
I love that because that reminds me of, it takes us back to verse 9 where we left off in chapter 3. So Eli realized that God was calling Samuel. So he says, so Eli told Samuel, "Go lie down. And if he says it again, I want you to say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" And so Samuel went and lay down in his place. Verse 10, the Lord came and stood there, calling as at all the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel this time said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And so that picture in verse 9 where we see he was lying down, he went back to his place. I love that picture because we don't have to go searching for our calling.
That's right.
You don't have to go searching for your calling because your calling will find you. All right. A lot of times we look at calling as this thing, or even our purpose or our passion or what we're meant to do or be. We have this thing that we're pursuing or that we're striving for. But it's not a commodity. Our calling is not a commodity. It's a relationship.
That's right. When I was working with the youth ministry, it wasn't something that I did. It was who I was.
Completely.
So I love that, what you just said. It's not a commodity. It's a relationship.
And what if God, he's actually calling us first and foremost to himself. Before what we're meant to do, before what we're meant to be, he's calling us to himself. And I tell my kids all the time, like, I would much rather, of course, I can outline their perfect life and what they're going to be when they grow up, and I can map it out for them. But I know that what's best for them is for them to have that relationship with God, for them to get that from God, not from me. And the cool thing is that they might misstep. They might mess up. They might, go the wrong way or go to California instead of going to Florida, somewhere along their journey. But all they have to do is just keep following, keep listening. Just like Samuel. I love this. We can say, all of us, we can say, like Samuel, "Here I am listening." Our biggest calling, we believe, is that relationship, is to hear from God.
Yeah.
It's all about relationship. And you only have to do this one thing. This one thing.
Yeah.
Just listen up.
So look in the next 5 minutes we have. So how do you do that? Because you may be sitting there on the boat, maybe sitting there at AJ's or online, and you're going, "Wow, this sounds really good. It does relate to me because I have this passion, but I'm in this job.
Right.
How do I know what I'm supposed to do?" Well, one of the things is, I want to take you back to what happened with Darlene and myself when we prayed, was God spoke to us through his word.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now it wasn't just, we understood the word of God because we'd been reading it.
Yeah.
So when he said Luke 5:4, we knew exactly where that was and went to it and knew what it meant to us. If we hadn't done that, it wouldn't have meant anything to us. That's why we really encourage you to find out what the word of God says, because it will confirm what you might already know and God is doing in your heart.
Yeah.
One of the scriptures that I love as well is at Psalm 139. It says, this is David talking. He says, "For you," talking to God, "you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and your works are wonderful. I know that full well. And what David is saying that even when I was born, before I was born, when I was in the womb, you put me together and you created me with purpose. See, when you begin to discover what your calling is, it's not going to come as a surprise. You're not going to go, wow, I didn't see that coming. You're going to understand it. And see, I believe this is key for understanding what you're called to do. You know, if I go and I'm doing something where you make pottery and you go to the wheel,
right.
I don't just slap mud on there and then start doing this and wonder what comes out. I go with a purpose. And so when things are created, they're created for a purpose. God created you for a purpose. What is that purpose? Well, you've got to look back at your interests, your passions, what you're gifted at, what makes you, like some people call it
Get
a
up
burden.
in the morning.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
see, that's not what you do. It's who you are. And that will help determine what you're called to do.
For sure. And another way that we want to urge you to practice hearing the voice of God is through prayer.
Yeah.
Talk to him.
That's right.
The more you talk to him, the more you start sharing with him and opening up to him, then he's probably going to talk to you back. You know, we forget that if we, just like Samuel, here I am, I'm listening. If we take a moment to listen in prayer, and here at Shoreline, we have prayer nights. We have Sunday morning prayer. My friends, Meg and Quinn, they lead each Sunday morning prayer, and they talk about the nuts and bolts of prayer and how to pray and the joy of praying, even with this simple principle of, what is it? Pause, rejoice, ask, and say yes. And that's a simple way. The more you talk to him, the more you listen to him, then that's going to give you more of that confirmation of who you are meant to be.
That's right.
As well. Plus, it goes back to community.
Yeah.
We believe that life is never meant to be done alone. And so goes back to that relationship, having a relationship with other people, share yourself with people. Just like you said, we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
Share yourself with other people, get in community with people, especially if they're listening to God, because not only will he speak directly to you, he can speak to you through other people as well. And so we always urge people to get hooked up with community. We have sisterhood, we have men, we have our tribe. We're going to have something soon for our tweens even, in order to help them experience real, true relationship with God.
That's right. And then lastly is, I'm really passionate about this, and I think it's key, is serving in the church, the local church. Now, I'm not saying because you serve in the local church that you're going to be called into full-time ministry or even find, your calling for life.
Right.
But it will help move you in that direction. And the reason why I'm passionate about it is because that's what happened to me. I'm here because I answered the call for a chaperone to take students to Wet and Wild.
Wow.
So
I love that. And you are created for a purpose. Just like you, Pastor Eric, I'm created for a purpose. You out there, you're created on purpose for a purpose. You have purpose. And the reason why I know that is because you're living.
That's
you
right.
exist. You're living proof of that. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. And I don't want you guys to go into this week or look at this week and this message like, okay, but I still don't have it all figured out yet. No, that wasn't the intent here. It was to give you that very next step.
One simple step.
Same
thing that Samuel did.
Yep. All you have to do is say, here I am listening. Here I am listening. And as a church, let's go for that challenge. This week, every morning when you wake up, every morning when you start your day, say, here I am listening. And then as you go through your day, start looking for opportunities to, okay, is that direction? Look for that nudging, that direction, or should I pursue that relationship or that decision? And you're not too young. If you're in middle school, if you're out on the boat right now, if you're in middle school, you are not too young for this. If you're facing a life transition, here I am listening. If you don't know what's next, here I am listening. If you're new to this God thing, that's all you have to do. That very first step. Congratulations, first of all, but that very first step is, here I am listening. And the cool thing about it is you're going to start hearing him. He's going to start speaking directly to you. You're going to start realizing your calling, what you're meant to be and do. And all you have to do is say, here I am listening.
In fact, that's our prayer for you this morning.
Yeah.
That Father God, that you would speak to everybody who dares to ask that question. Here I am, I'm listening. And we believe that you are faithful to do this in their lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pastor Eric and Pastor Robbie. This message, I think, is so important because it's for everybody. Every single one of us have an individual pull to what is being taught. We can apply it individually. God knows what's going on in your life better than anybody else. And so when we are open-handed and we say, I'm listening, God speak, then he answers and he will speak clearly. So I'd encourage you in the chat right now, man, if you have some thoughts on the message, write them down. If you feel a call right now, or if you feel there's something unique that you have a passion to, sometimes it just helps to write it out. So go into that chat and encourage each other. That's what it's for. But thanks for being here today. We said at the beginning that it's not just a message you watch and then forget about it. We have to apply this. If we're going to be better and we're going to make the world around us better, then we have to step courageously into what God has for us. Again, I'm so glad that you guys joined us today. Every day this week, let's be open-handed and listening as God guides us, and we'll see you again here next week.